You're watching a production of South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Sometimes you feel that maybe we don't exist. We don't exist in the actual world in which we live in.
American Indian perspective, place is always central. Place or space.
We didn't have a voice until we started to write our language ourselves.
It is just so simple. It is just respecting all of life, the universe, every drop of water, every grain of sand, and ourselves in that process.
One man told me, he said, we're the best kept secret in this country.
This is the land of the Oyate, the people. We call them the Sioux. They call themselves the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota, an alliance of friends. They are one people of an ancient culture, a culture that today continues to possess an ancient knowledge. They are the Oceti Sakowin, the people of the Seven Council Fires. For 600 years, as a nation, we have lived with the misconception that Columbus discovered America. What he did was stumble upon a land already occupied by many people and many nations. In the center of that vast land were a people who refer to themselves as the Oyate, the people. From the very first encounters with Europeans, there was misunderstanding and miscommunication.
The French trappers came into the Great Lakes area in the 1600s. And when they ran out of fur and pelts, they moved further west. And one of the Dakota divisions, there are 4 divisions in the D dialect, east of the Missouri. They came upon one of them, and they told them, they said, you can't come any further. So they went back to the Ojibwa in the Cree, because they've been working with them. And they said, who are those people? And the old man, they asked the old man, they said, who are those people? And he went, Nadawisi. One like that. So the interpreter said, snakes. They're snake people. So we've been tagged with that. And in French, the Frenchmen took that Nadawisi, and in French language, some words, if you pluralize it, you add O-U-X. So they add O-U-X to Nadawisi, and it's Nadawisu. And eventually just the word Sioux come out of that. What he was making reference to was, they're from the Snake-like River up in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. But in those days, we rely on translators. So when they saw that motion, they said, oh, snakes. And that happened a lot with the early translators. They kind of guess what you're saying because there was a language barrier. A lot of things were misinterpreted and create a lot of misunderstanding among us, and that's one of them.
The Lakota people, the Sioux people, seem to have accepted that name and really not understanding what it was. except that when two people don't understand each other, all they could do is just trust the other, in whatever communication they get going. And it soon became a common name. Now, I see a lot of tribes now more than ever saying, no, we don't want to be known as Sioux. We are the Oyate. It's Oyate, it's not Sioux. That never belonged to us.
Who are these people? Where did they come from? How did they get here? Have they always been here? What has changed for them over the last 500 years? To understand them as a people, we must first know their history. When they first encountered the native people of the Americas, Europeans considered them to be uncivilized, savages with no organized society. Today we know better. American Indian tribes had highly developed social and spiritual belief structures which were not entirely dissimilar from other societies and other cultures. The people the French called Sioux were organized into 3 tribes: Lakota, Dakota, Nakota. 3 divisions of one people, related by customs, beliefs, language, and blood. They once inhabited a large portion of the North American continent and gathered around the Oceti Sakowin.
Oceti Sakowin literally means the 7 council fires. Oceti are the fires, the council fires, and Sakowin is 7, the number 7. So those Oceti Sakowin, again, based on the literature, the documentary literature, is that the Oceti Sakowin were formed from the beginning of the people. This is based predominantly off the work of James Walker, and he was a physician who was on the Pine Ridge Reservation around 1900, around that time period right there. And some spiritual leaders and medicine men, Oglalas, took him in and taught him a lot. And then he took all these notes, and then out of that have come a series of books, 4 main books that are based upon the information that he collected back then. But according to Walker, the oldest of the Oceti Sakowin or peoples were the Medewa Kantawan, the Spirit Lake people. And so they were the first and the original. And from them came these other 6, what we would now call tribes, so that we end up with 7. And so the first one was the Medewa Kantawan. And then the second one were the Wapekute. And then the third ones were the Wapetawan. And the fourth ones were the Sisitawan. And those first 4 are the Dakotas. So we have the 4 Dakota tribes. And then the 5th one was the Ihanktawan. And the 6th one was the Ihanktawana. And those 2 are the Yanktons or the Nakotas. And then the 7th tribe were the Titowan, and those are the Lakotas. So those are the 7 that comprise the Oceti Sakowin. The Medewa Kantawan, Wapekute, Wapetawan, Sisitawan, Ihanktawan, Ihanktawana, and Titowan. Those are the Oceti Sakowin.
Scientists in fields as diverse as linguistics and anthropology have long argued that these people had settled in this region of the continent as recently as the 1700s, moving into the area from as far away as North Carolina. Many of the creation stories of the Oyate claim otherwise. In them, the people have always been here.
Oral history tells us of the creation story. Mangkha, the earth was created first, and it was one land base and one body of water. I mean, it's half and half. And coming from blood of Ian, we're all related. So we have a very simple phrase addressing that, all my relatives. So we address creation as a relative on earth and the universe. In the beginning, the children of Makha, the earth, worked together as relatives and they're very happy. But as time went on, they began to call names of each other, argue, fight, and they started killing each other. And then next thing you know, they began to hurt the earth. And the earth sent out warnings that they should stop. And they didn't listen, the children. So the earth cleansed herself by shaking. When she shook, they said the land base broke and islands come separating the children to give us another chance. And after that, in our own little islands, we were back to that all my relations concept. But as time went on, the same thing happened. Fighting, killing, and then abuse to the earth. And again, the earth sent out warnings that they should stop. And the children didn't listen, so she said, come inside, this is the last time. So when they went inside of her, she shook herself to cleanse herself. The land base opened and swallowed and closed all over. Opened and swallowed and closed. When she got done shaking, we were inside of her. And we have a trickster called Iktomi who tricked the people back to surface. This trickster came out and turned himself into a buffalo to draw the people out. And when the people came out of Wind Cave in the Black Hills. And there's a process that took place after that for settling in this area. So according to our oral history, we've always been here.
They differ a lot in details. But to me, the real significance of those origin stories, and you'll find that there are many parallels too, because throughout North America, there are many peoples that describe themselves as having emerged from lower worlds beneath this world. And one could take that literally, you know. But I myself, I don't interpret it literally. I look at it as more like emerging from one level of consciousness or understanding into a different level of consciousness. And to me, this is really that which elevates or enables people to achieve a higher level of consciousness, just like in this case of the Lakota emerging from a world beneath this world into this world. So it's just like you're going from a place of darkness, a place of restriction, into a place of light, a place of beauty, a place of color and sound.
While every human society on Earth has its own origin stories, and those stories do not always support the scientific explanation of how they came to be on this planet, they do form the core of their spiritual beliefs. Spirituality has been at the center of life in the Dakota Lakota world since before the arrival of European cultures.
Well, it seemed, in Lakota society, and I think in Oceti Sakowin society, kinship is everything. Relatives are everything. So as that original, if we go with what Walker said, that the Medewa Kantawan were the originals people, then as they grew in size and other people split off for various reasons, they all maintained those relationships of being related. So even though they might not see each other for long times, they still knew they were relatives. And then ideally, once a year, everyone would come together, and that would be probably over during some major ceremonies. The rest of the year, these were very independent peoples out. So it seems probably the purpose of Oceti Sakowin is to maintain relationships between these geographically dispersed peoples that all have a common origin.
Typically, people break into groups. Familiarity is a lot to do with it. Who you're best friends with, and your best neighbors. Throughout history, it's always been that way. Our particular group here, there were 22 what we call T-Oshpaya. Oshpaya is a group. T means a small group that lives together. So it's called T-Oshpaya. And to be a member of a T-Oshpaya, number one, you have to be of the same bloodline. You marry into it, or you're adopted into that system. Today, anthropologists call it extended family. But a T-Oshpaya is all based on blood, adoption, and marriage.
As Lakota people, we took care of not only our own, but others in the camp. That's always been demonstrated, throughout time by the providers of the camp, making sure that everybody in camp had enough to eat. The hunters came back, and those young men that went out hunting that had no families, they would provide for the elders of the camp, for the children of the camp that were orphans. Nobody was ever left out. Now, in that sense, we were living a life, a holistic life of a circle.
To fully understand the mindset of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota people in all their complexity is simple. Everything in life is a circle.
If you see a bird's nest, it's usually round in a circle, just kind of encompassing the young and nurturing the young within that circle. Well, we learn from the animals is exactly how we set up our own homes and teach our own children and nurture our own young. And with that, learning from our other relative nations, the animals and so forth, then we began to live that holistic life as two-leggeds. And in that way, we set up our villages, we set up our own homes in a circle and looked after everyone in that circle.
First of all, the hoop is the world's most pervasive archetype. In other words, no matter where you go on the planet, the symbolism of the hoop would pretty much resonate or be the same. So the hoop, what it symbolizes is represents peace, represents unity, represents balance and harmony, represents continuity, represents beauty. Everything in this world is a physical manifestation of a spiritual reality. Of course, the spiritual worlds are beyond the capacity human beings to fully grasp, but yet using this principle we can understand that everything here is a counterpart to something in the spiritual worlds above. And so therefore the Lakota people would study this creation in detail because it would offer insights into spiritual reality. So basically the most pervasive form that we can see in creation is the hoop of life. It just permeates everything, the hoop of life. And so this is a very important symbol. It represents the sign or the mark of the Creator, Tunkashila, Wakankanka, on this creation.
Even the great bison herds, on which the Lakota Nation depended for their very survival, moved in a circular migration, and the Lakota followed. For their cousins to the east, the Dakota and Nakota, life was different for a reason. Lifestyle was dictated by the lands on which they chose to live and the plants and animals of that region.
For us Dakota people, it was different than the Lakotas because Lakotas were plains people. In our area, we had a tremendous amount of richness, both fur-bearing. We had the deer, we had the elk, we had antelope, we had fish, We had fowls of different kinds. So we didn't have to really migrate. Dakota homelands is Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, Canada, this whole area.
The Dakota had rice that they harvested, and they had maple that they used as a sweet drink or a sweetener. You know, so there are things that we didn't do as cultural differences, but basically our prayers were the same. Some of our ceremonies had to be the same. We had to get married, and we had to name our children. And so many of those ceremonies were human things.
Because the Dakota lived in an area with many lakes and rivers, they did not have to depend on the bison for survival. For the Lakota people living west of the Missouri River in much drier lands, life was very different. For them, the bison became a movable feast, a way of life.
The buffalo became our brother. He became the main source of life in the lifestyle of the people when they came from Wind Cave to the plains. He gave of himself so that we would have food, clothing, homes, tools. Every part of the buffalo became a way of life for the people by everything that was provided for us through him. Even in the lifestyle that the buffalo lives, we learn.
The buffalo is central, and being a plains people and what we use the word nomadic people, the buffalo is what allowed that lifestyle. Because the buffalo moved, the people could move. And as long as you had buffalo, you had everything you needed to live. So wherever the buffalo were, you could live.
The buffalo is also spiritual because it keeps us alive physically, mentally, and spiritually. And there's also a legend, our story, that the buffalo brought us, our people, way back when, you know, a tool, like I guess it's a tool, a spiritual tool through which we can pray to the Great Spirit God, or, you know, through the peace pipe. And so the buffalo was the being that brought us that pipe too. So that's the spiritual connection we have with the buffalo.
We want to teach our people to take on the characteristics of that buffalo and to be able to, they always tells us a story about a blizzard coming and the buffalo will face the blizzard, you know, they'll hit the blizzard or the storm head on. And that's what we want people, that's our walk of life here as Lakota people.
Pre-European, the Lakota lifestyle was totally in balance with the environment, with the plant nation, the animal nation, the universe. Because we lived in such a way that we depended on the environment to survive, to live. We respected that which gave us life, which was the water and the food and the buffalo and everything else that, you know, allowed us to live. We respected that. Because of the respect we had for the environment and the universe, our spirituality was very, very strong. Our language consisted of nothing but the words of the environment and the spirituality that came with it.
We went through many different things, and in our walk here, you know, we're still in existence today, and it was because of the buffalo and the horse that kept us alive. So we really, you know, the animal nation, we really hold them in high esteem because they brought us to this point here today.
I hate to use the word animal because we don't have any concept of animal in our culture, in our language. We call them living beings of the earth, or nations. Coyote Nation, Deer Nation, Buffalo Nation. Because we know they are in tune with creation and they're the ones that help us live. So we just take what we need and we work with them. This is one thing the older people that taught us say, just remember that. They're just like us. And they're the ones who taught us how to live.
Life was good for the Oceti Sakowin before the coming of the Washichu, the whites. With plenty of buffalo, Lakota numbers grew, as did their position in the 7 council fires.
In Lakota society, and again by extension I would say Oceti Sakowin, things aren't random and there's no chaos, that it's very structured, there's a reason for everything.
The circle of life for the Lakota Dakota people has always been and remains even today both simple and complex. Woven into their society is a system of song, dance, storytelling, beliefs, ritual, and language which serves them well through good times and bad.
We tell the next generation so that they would remember. And I think that it's in the songs. It's in the songs. And my Auntie Nellie and her husband, Matt Tubles, they saved many of those old songs. And every now and then when I go over there, they say, Auntie Nellie, could you sing me some songs? And I make sure I have my recorder on because those are the last ones that are the ancient. The ancient songs that has the memory bank. Many times our songs carry history.
I think a lot of times in our current use of the arts, music and dance, it's people automatically, it seems like automatically put it in a category of entertainment. But you see the native people, I'd say indigenous people or Lakota people or any tribal people you might say, they use the arts for the opposite purpose, opposite reason, totally opposite. In other words, you use the arts when you want to connect with reality, connect with something which is true, which is real, which is genuine. And I think that the Lakota people in particular have utilized the arts in this way. And so then these 4 instruments, they're related to that, like so that the drum is the sound of the thunder. It can be the heartbeat, it can be the voice of the ancestors, but it's also that sound of the thunder that stirs, it shakes, and it summons everything, back to life. And the rattle is the sound of the rain, a water of life that comes down, that most essential element. Then of course, like it could be a whistle or a flute, this is the sound of the wind that purifies, but also the wind that breathes life into this world. And then the voice is the lightning, which of course speaks when the thunder comes up, but it's actually that lightning, that force that puts the charge into this world, electrifies and puts the life force into this world.
To the old way of life, prayer, ritual, dance, and music were all part of the dance of life. It was also a way to keep the history of their people alive through their oral tradition.
If we're going to do something, we ask and we pray for truth and how we're going to do this. And then the messengers or friends from Spirit will say, I'll give you a song and you need to learn the song when you do something important. And then you sing that song and then you start to, have long oratories, beautiful oratory in terms of 2 or 3 hours of teaching and talking about history, talking about many things. This is where we get our knowledge, is through oratory of people over the years telling us these things. And myself, I memorized many Sundance songs. And I don't have to have a songbook. I could just sing it. I mastered all these prayers. I could say many, many prayers. Or for talking, I could be here talking in my own language for 2-3 hours at a time. So those are the things, the skills that our Indian people had. Not only hunting and being a warrior, but having knowledge and how to teach.
The reason why we have traditional songs is to give a memory to that body. Body memory has a lot to do with healing. If you went astray and came back and you heard that old song again, it seems like you're home and you feel like you're part of it again. That body memory and that vibration would bring it back. So some songs we can't change. And we share some of the melodies. We share exact words with other tribes, not necessarily Nakota, Dakota, Lakota. Other tribes have the same melodies. So that's why we have those grand gatherings where now we call them intertribal songs. They belong to all tribes.
These deep thoughts are our ancient wisdom and knowledge that comes from our grandfathers and grandmothers. That's our wellspring of knowledge. So anytime we talk about something that is already there and then we just reform it to make it more meaningful to ourselves, we need to describe that and say that this is Native American ancient knowledge.
While some of the details of spiritual ceremonies may differ among the tribes of the Oceti Sakowin, the 7 basic rituals have not disappeared with the coming of the European religions and governmental suppression. Most, if not all, are still practiced in one form or another to this day. If particular numbers appear to be important to the Oyate, it is because, in their belief, numbers are sacred.
The 2 most important numbers in Lakota society would be 7 and 4. And 7 structures social things. So the ideal is to have 7 social units, or to use the number 7 to do things socially. That's why the Oceti Sakowin, the 7 council fires, and of those 7, 1 are the Titawan. They are subdivided into 7. And then one of those are the Ogalalas, for instance. And ideally, the Ogalalas were divided into 7 Teoshpayes. So you see 7s and 7s and 7s as far as social organization. Then the number 4 is ritual. We see the 4 winds, right? And ritually, things are done in 4s. So those 7 and 4 are very important. Then you combine those or multiply them. 4 7s gives you 28, and that's one of the most important numbers, this idea of 28. So in Sundance Lodges, there'll be 28 divisions around the circle. In a month, there's about 28 days. In a Lakota month, because it's a lunar month, so you have 13 months in a year, there's 28 days. I've read that there's 28 ribs on a buffalo, and that in a war bonnet there will be 28 feathers. So there's this idea of the 28s as this combining the ritual and the social. So those numbers 4, 7, and 28 are very important. Also, even in the 7s, we see the 7 broke down into 4, 2, and 1. Just like we had 4 Dakotas, 2 Nakotas, and 1 Lakota. So the number 7 isn't just 7 by itself, but it's usually seen as 4, 2, 1. The 4 directions, 4, up and down, 2, and then the center, 1. And together that makes 7. And usually when people pray, then they address those 7 directions. So we see the combining of 4 and 7, and then the breakdown of 7 into 4, 2, 1.
One of the 7 sacred rituals is the Hunka ceremony, the making of relatives.
Lakota society is really based on kinship and making of relatives. And that's one of the 7 ceremonies, is the Hunka ceremony, where you make relatives. And those relatives that are Hunka relatives supposedly are stronger. That relationship or connection is stronger than a biological one. A biological one we don't have any control over, but one that we choose to make brothers or sisters, or that hunka relative is then seen as very, very strong. That relationship, very strong. It's the making of relatives, where you adopt someone as a relative. It might be as a father, as a mother, as a son, or sister, brother, whatever those two individuals choose to make the relationship. If I adopt you, make a hunka brother, then my family treats you as a brother, just as a brother, no differentiation. And that's how it was, and that's one of the values that is continuing now in contemporary Lakota society. Hunka relatives are still being made, and I expect they'll always be made.
The circle of life for the Oyate has always been centered around the Tioshpaya, or extended family. Each person had a role to perform in keeping the circle whole.
The social structure of the Lakota went that the men took on the roles of the protector, the provider, and the leadership roles as well. And the women's roles were to maintain the house, the household, and to keep order within the one household. The women's roles were that of nurturers, of nurturing the young, nurturing the spirituality of the people, nurturing the lifestyles of the people. And they are presently called the backbone of the nation. The educators of our people were in fact the women up until a certain age, and then the boys would go under the mentorship of a young man or grandfather or uncle or father. And the young women would stay under the mentorship of the women, a mother, an aunt, grandmother. And there was the grandmothers that actually were the educators of the very young.
The women owned the house, or in teepee, the lodge, and their roles were anything associated with the house and the household. Men hunted, provided food that way, and the counselors and the governmental leaders, civil leaders, were almost exclusively men, and that's how the people will continue. So this idea of kinship, the idea of speaking the language, the idea of knowing the culture, the idea of respecting relatives and the environment, all of the values that we've heard about or that we've read about, I think ideally we're trying to perpetuate, and to varying degrees. But even those long ago peoples were not perfect, that humans are not perfect. So there's always this striving for the ideals, and Lakotas have some great ideals, and they guide everyday life. We rarely, if ever, achieve them, but they give us something to shoot for, something to aim for. That's the goal, is to be a good relative or a good Lakota.
Lakota, as near as I can figure out, means when somebody is a Lakota, he is a man or woman of peace. That's what the term implies. You're a man of peace, you live in balance with creation, and you address all creation as a relative.
Of all the sacred objects in Lakota beliefs, the sacred pipe is perhaps the most revered, even to this day. The story of how the people were given the pipe and sacred instructions for using it is perhaps as important to the Oyate as the story of Moses and the Ten Commandments is to Christians.
This is the story of the maiden from heaven. Her name was Oceti Sakowin, which means the white buffalo calf maiden. Oceti is the calf. Oceti is a word of a buffalo calf, and then Ska is the white, and then the ending wi is the woman. So Ptehinchila Skawin, the white buffalo calf woman, that she was commissioned or authorized by the Tunkanshila, grandfather above, to convey a token of his love in his teachings. This maiden appeared to 2 scouts. The people were at that time in great need. They were starving, or something was occurring that necessitated these scouts to venture far out from their home. They saw something approaching. And then as it got closer, this one scout, I guess he was kind of the embodiment of a lot of the lower or animalistic tendencies. He told the other scout, he says, "It's a woman, let's go attack her." And the other one said, no, we can't. This is a holy appearance, something sacred. And as she approached, then she spoke, this woman said, that which you wish to do, now you may fulfill that. What you want to do, now's your chance. So anyway, that scout who had all these, you might say animalistic thoughts or tendencies, rushed forward, and then that cloud or mist descended, and when it lifted, then just his bones were there. And then she spoke to this other scout, "Your grandfather above has this great abiding love for his grandchildren," meaning the people of this earth, and so therefore he wishes to convey this love and these great teachings. And then furthermore, she says that she has been authorized to convey this on his behalf. She gave that scout the assignment of returning and gathering the people, and that in 4 days' time she would appear and present this message, this message from heaven. The oral tradition states that she did appear, and that she spent as much as 4 days amongst the people imparting these different teachings. The token that symbolized all the teachings that this maiden brought was that pipe, the calf pipe, the Ptehinchila Chanumpa. So then the person who received that Ptehinchila Chanumpa on behalf of all the present and unborn generations was a man who, by some accounts, his name was Tatanka Wosla Naji. It's a buffalo that stands upright. So then he received that on behalf of all the people, and he received the teachings. And then it just so it's just come down the line now up to today, and that to me this is the most important story. It's not necessarily an origin story, but it does, in one sense, it is an origin of the people's spiritual consciousness, their awareness of themselves as a people, as a kindred, who have a destiny before God, and who have something wonderful to bring into this world. And I think this is a very important story because, so much of history, the Lakota did, have had a great impact on history, and I think continue to and will have a great impact in the future. And I think that really the sense of purpose, sense of destiny started at that point there when this woman brought this teachings, which is really the covenant. She renewed this covenant, this relationship between heaven and earth. And within that covenant, she brought spiritual laws which are immutable, they're changeless, They're the same. The spiritual laws that she presented are essentially the same as the basis of Christianity, the basis of Islam, the basis of all the different world religions.
In the early days before Columbus, life was, for the most part, good. After the arrival of Europeans on this continent in 1500, American Indian culture in the East changed drastically. Life for the people of the Oceti Sakowin remained pretty much normal until the march of westward expansion reached them in the late 1700s. The overwhelming numbers of white settlers moving into the land of the Oyate and beyond brought with them massive change. Treaties were made. Treaties were broken. Lands were set aside for the Oyate. Lands were taken away. War was inevitable, sudden, and brutal. The Lakota knew how to fight to keep their lands and their way of life. They were the last of the American Indian tribes to resist the United States military and the onslaught of white settlers. But the odds and the numbers were against them. The old way of life for the people of the Oceti Sakowin was over. A new way of life was begun. Some would say the circle was broken. Others would say it has only been tested for the past 3 centuries, that it has not been broken, only weakened. Regardless, life had changed for the Oyate in a drastic way.
When the Reservation Act was enacted, our ancestors were put on reservations, and then the Dawes Act came into play, where certain pieces of land were allotted to ancestors, to the heads of family, and then they were told to farm it. Well, farmers we were not. We were hunters. We were gatherers. We were not farmers. We did not know anything about farming. When the reservation system came in, at the same time, certain institutions came into the reservation, and one of them was the educational institutions. And they formed boarding school systems and the Catholic school systems here. Now, when that happened, families were taken apart. The Tioshbaya system came to a shaky place. We were taken apart, and different roles came into play. The role of the hunter-provider was then taken from our men. The role of the gatherer, the nurturer, was almost taken from the women. Their children were taken away and put in the boarding school systems. The men no longer had the buffalo to hunt. Other things came into the lives of the Lakota Oyate. Other things such as the alcohol, the drugs, probably that came just a little bit after the alcohol, but I know alcohol was the dominant thing or force that came into our lives when the reservations were first started. When the reservations were first formed, it created a dependency. We were at that point because our subsistence patterns were no longer there, and the buffalo especially was no longer there. It took away roles, it took away responsibilities. The buffalo was replaced by rations. So now we became totally dependent on the government and the ration system that we had. And our oral tradition almost came to an end because we had somebody else teaching our children. We had somebody else disciplining our children. We had somebody else providing for our children and protecting them.
My mother wouldn't let me go to school for a long time, and I never knew why. I found out that it was against the law to be Lakota. From 1880 to 1978, this country outlawed our ways, our philosophy, spirituality, and language. And they had people arrested for practicing. Missionaries, when you die, and if they know you practice any of the traditions or spiritual ceremony, they will bury you outside of a cemetery, telling your family you're burning in hell. If you're 5 years old and your favorite uncle is buried there, that's going to put a lot of fear in the rest of your life, because you don't want to go to hell. It was really bad here back in the 50s and 60s. By 1950s, practically 100% of our people denied their Indianness. They're scared of our ceremonies. They spoke Lakota, but they're either Catholic or Episcopal. The churches learned the language and acculturate and assimilate them into these churches. But that's all. So you put the two together, and they have a deathly fear of Lakota spirituality, thinking it was evil, it's bad. And that was the whole focus of the education system, right from the beginning, take this Indian out of here and fit him into this. And in order to do that, you have to break that child from family ties, family influence, and the language. So that's when the boarding schools were established to do that. I was very fortunate. I didn't get into a boarding school system till I was 16. When I walked in there, I was shocked because all my peers, because of my age, they put me in with the 8th graders. And most of my peers were ridiculing me because I was Indian. And all the students there were Indian students. I found out many years later that they had been in that institution since they were 5. So by the time they're teenagers, they've already been conditioned to deny their Indianness. And when you don't have that, you don't care about yourself. I'm no good, so I don't care. But if you know who you are, there's pride in that. And you want to keep that.
What you see today among Dakota people or Lakota, Nakota, alcoholism, disease, lack of education, all of those came as a result of a disruption of a highly civilized culture.
For the Dakota, Nakota, Lakota Nation, the changes to their way of life over the past 130 years have been drastic. The free roaming buffalo herds are gone, but the buffalo remains a part of their lives. The freedom to move villages at a moment's notice is gone, but the people remain free on and off their reservations. The change brought poverty, disease, alcoholism, and lost hope. But the Oyate persevere. New generations have been born into this changing world of theirs, sometimes lost, sometimes confused, but often energized to make changes to their new way of life.
We really do want to start with the children, and there's an emphasis on starting with children and trying to teach a more rounded or more accurate history, is what I argue. I think we've really been taught inaccuracies, or there's these huge omissions of history. So we just won't talk about that because it's too painful, or it doesn't paint us out in a good light. We're not going to teach about it. American Indians have a phenomenal dropout rate from the time kids start school to how many actually graduate high school is appallingly a small number. So something's wrong there. Something's not working and hasn't worked. So that's a huge challenge for those in the education field, and maybe broader than education, that American Indian things get relegated to the past, and that's the ideal. And so we're a fallen people from the get-go. And so rather than talking about culture, if we talk about history, then we're on a academic and a school educational footing that's equal. So we're going to look at history, and there's a long history before non-Indians get here, and it's a great history from all of the tribes here. That's a heroic history, and it continues all the way up to now, and it's still a heroic history. Bring it up here through termination, through the Indian Reorganization Act, through allotment, through the Black Hills case. Teach about history, American Indian history as it relates to this state. We can do it, and that'll give us all the same footing.
When you get back to the language, the word for children, they say wakayaja, wakayaja, and the root of that word is waka. And I don't know, there's not really agreement as to how to exactly to define this word waka, but it has a lot to do with sacredness and holiness, has a lot to do with something that has a heavenly origin. And so that's a beautiful frame of reference with which to view the children. As people within the community, it behooves us to strategize and figure out what we can do to create a nurturing environment for these little guys. Just like Sitting Bull, the great Sitting Bull, who's buried right out here, just outside the house here. Well, a couple miles from here. He says, let us put our hearts and minds together and see what future we can make for our children.